This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 339. I'm your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So for this episode here is going to be my Scouring Through the Sixes number 3. My two featured reviews I'm going to be having here are going to be The Demon Barber of Fleet Street. This is the version from 1936. So this is a Sweeney Todd story. I'm going to bring this up with Lee Cronin's The Mummy. So what we're doing here as my double feature is the domestic monster as the theme within the violation of sanctuary. We have a barber who is a service provider turned horror. Then there's other as ancient forces invading the modern lived-in space of the home that is supposed to be kind of a safe space there, and it is no longer. And then for mini reviews here, my Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch is going to be Critters from 1986. This is going to be, as well as I have a couple screeners here of Soul's Chapel and Beyond Mamushi. And then there's also going to be a rewatch here of a 2026 wide release of Obex, and then two documentaries of This is GWAR and Terror in the Skies. But before I jump over to those mini reviews, let me do my
monthly review.
For April 2026, I watched 48 total films. 31 of those are in the horror genre, so that's a 64.85% of that being in horror. And then I have 11 movies that were released in 2026 widely. So my horror movies are I Know Exactly How You Die, Under Control, The Plague, Midnight Faces, From Beyond, Godzilla vs. Megaris, Angel Dust, Demons of the Mind, We Bury the Dead, The Devil Doll, the version from 1936, Chopping Mall, Touch Me, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, Faces of Death. This is going to be the 2026 version. I got to check out In Search of Darkness, the 1995 to 1999 one, The Whistler, Primate, Exit 8, The Walking Dead, this is from 1936, Night of the Creeps, Didn't Die, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, Happy Halloween, This is GWAR, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, 28 years later, The Bone Temple, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, this is the version from 1936, Critters, Soul's Chapel, and Beyond Mamushi. So 13 countries are represented. This can be United States, Romania, Australia, United Arab Emirates, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, Venezuela, Colombia, Canada, Ireland, and Spain. So the 2026 watches are going to be I Know Exactly How You Die, The Plague, Touch Me, Faces of Death, The Whistler, Exit 8, Didn't Die, Happy Halloween, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, and Soul's Chapel. Now, the oldest watches are all going to be from 1936. It's going to be The Devil Doll, The Walking Dead, and The Demon Barber of Fleet Street. So the average year is going to be 2003. So let me do some of these stats here as well. I kind of realized I kind of glossed over them. So going back then to new horror movies. This is actually tied for my highest I've ever done. 2024 I also did 11. The lowest ever would have been 2018 and 2020 where I only did 4. I've watched 58 movies that are released in that specific year. Then for horror movies, 31 actually came up short of is actually my third highest. The highest I've ever done was 2019, I did 38. And then last year I did 34, so 31's right there. And then the lowest I've ever done would have been in 2018 where I only did 18. So I've watched 249 horror movies in the months of April. And then for total films, I did 48, which is going to be the highest I've ever done. I did 42 in 2019 and 40 in 2025, so I at least made my minimum goal of 30 that I need to do this month. Lowest ever would have been back in 2021 where I only did 33. I've watched 346 horror movie or total movies across all of April's. So for this average year is 2003 for this one. This is actually bringing up my average. Across the board, it's usually 1995. This is the newest I've ever done. The earliest would have been in 2023. Was at 1983. I usually kind of hover in the 80s or the 90s is normal. So 2003 is definitely kind of bringing all of that up there. And then for my ratings here is going to be the highest is going to be The Plague at a 9. The lowest is going to be Under Control at a 3.5. 7.2 is the average that I kind of did. This is actually kind of on the lower end still. Last year I did a 7. The highest ever would have been in 2024. I was a 7.6, and the 2 years before that I was a 7.5. Lowest ever would have been back in 2019 where I did a 6.9. Nice. So I'm actually in line with my average across the board here of 7.2. So in percentage of horror movies, this year was a 64.58%. This is the lowest that I've done since 2022, where I was at a 67.65. The year before that, I was at a 60.61, and then 2018, I was only at 48.65%. So everything that was actually kind of crazy. The highest I've ever done would have been in 2019, where I was at 90.48%. So across the boards in April's, I'm kind of watching here a 71.62% for the horror movies and everything like that. And then how are my yearly totals doing? But before I get to that, actually, let me say that 48 films, 79.4 hours, 52 directors, 10 countries, 4 languages. That's across all genres. The top years would have been 2026 at 8, 2025 at 7, 1986 at 4, 2019 at 3, 1936 at 3. Sci-fi was my next highest at 14. Japan was at 8 films, so that was second. UK right behind them was 7. Japanese language is going to be 6. Kids and animation is running away with it thanks to my daughter. And then the ones that are tied are going to be Gag, Adorable Child, Weird, Imaginative, Creative at 7 films. Then the top actor for the month is actually going to be a bunch of people that were from the Pixar type stuff. It's John Ratzenberg, Bonnie Hunt, and Kevin Michael Richardson. He's from Trolls, actually. And then Koichi Uyada at 4 films. And then for director is going to be Masaki Tezuka doing some of those Godzilla stuff. And then I had some other people. Seth Breedlove had 2 that I watched in the month. Highest average and most popular is going to be Monsters, Inc. And then lowest average is going to be London Fields that I covered with Jamie. Most obscure and newest is going to be From the Beyond. This is a Seth Breedlove documentary. Oldest is going to be Midnight Faces. That was back on March 24th, 1926. Longest was that Into the Darkness one that I watched. And the shortest is actually going to be one of the last ones of Beyond Mamushi. So for the year, though, let's kind of look at how we're running with things here. For 2026 watches, I should be at 33.2. I'm at 45, running away with it right now. For horror films, I should be at 121.6. I'm at 121, so kind of doing well there to stay on pace for 365. So for 500 movies, I should be at 166.8. I'm at 189, which is kind of crazy that I might do it again this year. So then for average year, 1999 is what I'm normally at. I'm at a 2003 right now, so kind of on that one, kind of see if that's going to be probably something that's going to actually stay up there. But so for average rating, 7.3 across all of the times. I'm actually bringing that down to 7.1. This is actually one of my lower ones. Let me see if I can actually kind of compare how things usually, like the next one was last year was at 2002. I'm usually in the 90s, so kind of crazy there. And then it actually, that might even be brought down. Nope, that's actually right there. And then for the 7.3, this one right now is, this is my second lowest that I've done, it looks like. I was at a 7.0 last year and then 7.1 in 2024. The highest I've ever done would have been 2019 where I was at a 7.6. And that percentage of horror right now is at 63.87. This is the lowest I've done. Well, as I got later in the year, that'll actually kind of ramp back up. But I'm at 78.42% of everything I watch is in the horror genre, so kind of crazy and interesting there. And as of right now, my average, if you kind of take everything that I've done, I'm at 92.9 for new releases. That'll definitely kind of see how everything's go, because the last 3 years I've done 100 at least, and I'm probably going to do that easily here this year. So for horror movies, I'm at 344.1 for per year usually. And like I said, this was being brought down by this year right now. And then 432.2 is what I usually kind of been doing. So we'll kind of see how that kind of alters as I go along. But I've watched 836 movies that were released in that specific year in horror. I watched 3,097 horror movies and 3,890 just regular movies. Kind of crazy to kind of break it down into that number there. But for this year so far, most seen actor, Johnny Depp, 8 films, thanks to the podcast. Then they're Tied for second with 5 films are going to be Koichi Ueda and Laurie Metcalf. She's kind of looking out there. She was in a Scream film while also being in the Toy Story films that I've actually rewatched for this year. Then tied for fourth with 4 films is going to be Tsutomu Kiwagawa and Takio Nakahara, Dee Wallace and Barbara Crampton. And then tied for second with 3 films is going, or tied for, that's not right, I didn't update that properly. Tied for 8th is going to be Akihiko Hirata and Tom Butler. Most scene directors, top is going to be Seth Breedlove at 4. Then it's going to be Masaki Tezuka at 3. And then tied for the next there is going to be at 2 films is Ishiro Honda, Ernesto Gastaldi, Vittorio Salerno, and Darren Lynn Bousman. So that's all I'm going to do here then for this monthly review. Let me go ahead then and rest my voice and just say thank you so much for listening. And I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me. And let's get over to those mini reviews after a brief break.
Are you tired of the coffee crash? Still jittery an hour after your morning cup of coffee? Listen, I used to drink 5, 6, 7 cups a day to just keep going. The anxiety, the stomach pains, the afternoon crash, it was brutal. Then I discovered Rise Coffee, and everything changed. Rise has less than half the caffeine as regular coffee, but here's the magic. It contains 6 organic mushrooms, including cordyceps, lion's mane, and others that naturally sustain your energy without the jitters or crash. We're talking sharper focus, immune support, better gut health, and calm, sustained energy that lasts all day. Plus, it's organic, vegan, and has 0 added sugars. Unlike other mushroom coffees, Rise is USA grown in California. A full spectrum of mushrooms per serving that actually works. Here at Pod Nation, we only partner with brands we actually believe in, and Rise Coffee is the real deal. Head to risesuperfoods.com and use promo code PODNA15 for 15% off your order. That's PODNA 15 for 15% off. Ditch the crash, fuel your day the right way with Rise Coffee.
I'm Dean, I'm the dad.
I'm Laura, I'm the mom.
And I'm Arthur, I'm the son.
And together we are
Family Plot.
Plot Podcast is the best history podcast that we can make.
Like intellectual pancakes for the soul.
I've been called the cool dad you want to take a road trip with and learn about history from.
One of our listeners said, listen to me was like Mom reading you a bedtime story full of cool history, and I am here for it.
And one of our reviewers called me the snarky brother they wish they had.
So join us to learn some cool stuff,
to hear some fun banter and wild tangents.
And we are unabashedly LGBTQ friendly and trans positive and supportive.
And remember,
when you listen,
you're our family.
So join us and occasionally some very cool guests
for the Family Plot Podcast.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
And for my first mini review here is going to be Critters from 1986. This is directed by Stephen Herrick. I think maybe how you say his name. This is also co-written between him and Dominic Muir. And it also looks like that Don Keith Opper also helped out with it as well. But this is starring Dee Wallace, M. Emmett Walsh, and Billy Greenbush. Well, I'd also give credit here to Opper, who becomes very important to the series. So this is an alien invasion, B-horror, dark comedy, monster, satire, comedy sci-fi film from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 6.1 on IMDb and a 3.0 on Letterboxd, or Synopsis. A group of small but vicious alien creatures called Krites escape from a prison transport vessel and land near a small farm town on Earth, pursued by 2 shape-shifting bounty hunters. So it's a film that I originally saw in parts due to it being recorded on VHS at my grandmother's house. I don't recall ever watching it all the way through until renting it from my local video store. I know from there I've seen it at least one more time when I picked up the DVD, so it's been over a decade since my last watch, and this is now a Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch that I was kind of excited to check out to see how this would hold up. I'm going to go ahead and start by saying that this is up there as one of my favorite little creature films. It feels like it borrows a bit from like Invaders from Mars for the setup. There's also comparisons to Gremlins with, outside of it having like small creatures, they are 2 different types of films though. That one leans more into comedy, where this one's darker and the Krites are much more dangerous. Now with that setup, I do love the siege narratives that we get here. There's this family that is isolated on their farm. They can't get away easily, even more so that the Krites can roll as a ball and making them faster. They are vicious and hungry. They also have weapons with they have like spines that contain poison that they can shoot at people, and it puts their victims to sleep. So this does well in setting up the characters of this family to the point where we care about what happens. Another good element is that they don't feel safe, as their father here of Jay, who is portrayed by Bush, gets attacked multiple times, as is his children. And let me go ahead and actually just kind of finish out introducing the family here. So his wife is Helen, portrayed by Dee Wallace, and then the son is going to be Brad, portrayed by Scott Grimes, and then April is the daughter, who is Nadine Vander Velde. So then, something else that makes this work, though, are the creature design done by the Chiodo brothers. These critters are both cute and menacing. They have rows of sharp teeth. Them being puppets, that makes it even work better for me. There's a lot of care and thought put into what they're able to do. This also includes like making a giant one as things go on. We learn enough about them where you don't need an information dump. There's this added element here that they're so scary that the bounty hunters are following just as straight up a limit. Let's then circle back to the theme then we have here of the family. Setting this in Kansas is a good touch. This is a simple family making their way. Jay is a hardworking farmer. Helen takes care of the home. Brad ruffles Jay's feathers as he wants more than what is provided to him by this farm. That feels real for the era, especially being in the 1980s. April is a very pretty girl who is dating the cool new guy from New York, who is Steve Elliott, portrayed by Billy Zane when he still had hair. Didn't mean to throw you under the bus there, but there's an innocence here being developed where they live. They're not equipped to handle this otherworldly menace. They do have guns, so they can at least fight back, and I do appreciate that element. Another thing kind of go into here would be like, this is an interesting blend of 1950s sci-fi horror with 1980s suburban anxieties and the invasion of the domestic sphere. This explores like nature versus technology. Krites are primitive, space-faring creatures driven by hunger, where humans are traditional, using traditional weapons against them. The bounty hunters have high-tech gear. These hunters use fluid identities to blend in with the townspeople. Finally, Charlie finds redemption and vindication when the alien threat proves his claims true. So he is actually, he's portrayed by Hopper. It's Charlie McFadden. He works on the farm as a farmhand, works for Jay. But he's also the town drunk, and the people seem to like him, but they're just kind of annoyed by some of the things that are going on there. And also say here that one of the bounty hunters is Johnny Steele. Well, that's the persona he's taken, who is a rock star on Earth, and he is portrayed by Terrence Mann. The other one kind of rotates between a few different people here, including like a priest. He also takes on a cop, and then finally he ends up looking like Charlie for a little while here. I'll then go over to the acting performances. I love Wallace, and she's great as a mother here. She isn't given much opportunity here to work with to kind of overly develop her character, but that's kind of... it's a little bit different from some of the things she's done in this era while still being that motherly role. Bush is good as her husband and the patriarch. It is fun to see a young Grimes, because I know him from ER. He plays well off his parents and Vandervelde. Opera is good as the village drunk. We also here have Walsh, who is portraying Harv, the sheriff. We have Sally is Lynn Shay. She is the person, she is running the phones for the police. I brought up Zane, Man. The rest of the cast around is not for what was needed. Also, to me, the filmmaking. I've already said how great the creature work was. The cinematography and framing helped hide the seams there. The after effects of attacks, including the blood, looked good. They were able to capture the small town and country feel. That is something I appreciate, having grown up outside of the city. Other than that, I do think that the sound design is good. I love the language that the Krites use. I actually was looking this up. It sounds like the person who did the voices for them was using like a combination of like Japanese and French, which is kind of cool. This can be played for comedy. We also have the reoccurring song that is sung by the character of Johnny Steele. That adds charm. So in conclusion, this stands out as a favorite creature feature, successfully blending 1950 sci-fi horror and 1980 suburban anxiety into a darker film than its contemporary Gremlins. Giving praise here would be to the effective siege narrative, which is an isolated Kansas farm family fight for survival against the vicious yet charming Krites. Much of the film's success is attributed to the Chiodo brothers' creature design, which are both cute and menacing. Among the strong acting performances from the cast include Wallace and Opper. Overall, this is a compliment for me, is the well-executed filmmaking, the cinematography, the practical blood effects, the charming sound design, solidifying its place as a classic of the genre. So my rating here then for Critters, I give this one an 8 out of 10. And for my second review here is going to be a screener I got to check out of Soul's Chapel. This is from 2026. It was directed by Jake C. Young. It was written by David Daring. Now, Young also stars in this with Jeremy Boggs and Audrey Kurtzinger. This is from here in 2026, like I was already saying. This is a horror film that is from the United States. There actually is no average as of yet on IMDb, and the same thing for Letterboxd. So the synopsis: when a drifter is cutting through the backwoods of Kentucky in search of gold, he decides to weather the snowstorm in a small church called Soul's Chapel, but you'll soon find out the fate that awaits him is anything but holy. So this is a film that I learned about thanks to Scott Motisco. He reached out with a press release about the film, and seeing that this was combining occult horror with spaghetti western was intriguing. Aside from that innovation, I did come to this one blind, and I like to check out independent horror films for my end-of-year lists, so this is a Scouring Through the Sixes film as well. So what I'm going to start is saying that this is an odd story. What I'm gathering is Soul's Chapel is a real place in Kentucky. It is supposed to be very haunted. It feels like the writer wanted to make an occult story surrounding it. I'm not sure how much is pulled from actual lore or just kind of writing a story here. Let me then start with the positives. I do like the spaghetti western style hero. He rolls into this area without a name. He gets taken prisoner in this church and he needs to go about getting free. Young does well in his role. That helps. I even like that the group that is holding up this church here is that they're posing as churchgoers. We see that it's a cover. The lore that the spirits that inhabit this area is something else I enjoyed. That's a positive. The last part here would be we have this woman in white, and how she goes about getting her revenge was good. Let me actually go ahead and start introducing some of these people. So Young is the drifter who is named Ray, and then we actually start this off with a preacher killing himself. That's Reverend Popwell, portrayed by Andrew Pearson. And kind of looking at this here is that we have a priest who I think his real name is Red, is portrayed by Boggs. There's Sister Agatha, portrayed by Kurt Singer. And then he is there with Schoolboy, portrayed by Gage Carnes. And then we also have Jim is Joseph McDowell. And then the woman in white is Molly Gill. So my biggest issue here is the story is just lacking true connective threads for me to work for me. I'd like to know a little bit more about the church. It intentionally goes vague, which does feel, inspired by supernatural horror films from Italy. The problem, though, is that we need a little bit more vivid images or going a little bit more over the top with the effects to eliminate the issues that you have when your story isn't strong enough and your visuals don't kind of pick it up. This also has odd, timeless feel. There's a reference here to a Great War. I figured at first that was World War II, but we have some futuristic looking guns and talks of a radio. There's some steampunk feel to it with some of the stuff that people are wearing. Ultimately, I just got a little bit bored, and the steampunk stuff also goes over to the guns. I will then shift over to the themes that I picked up on. This one is in the forefront is greed and the weight of obsession with finding that treasure. There's also this isolation that comes with the wandering drifter. The wilderness can be unforgiving. This is taking place in a church that can be seen as a corruption of the sacred. Ray does have like a moral bargain to survive. Something else is that this timelessness, with feeling like it's set in the past with futuristic elements to give it that. I just need a little bit more developed there. Let's then go over to that performance. I've already said that, I think my bigger thing here is probably with the writing, not necessarily the acting. I think Young is fine as a drifter. Boggs, Kurt Singer, Carnes, and McDowell all work with the people that he encounters in the church there. I also give credit here to Brian Bremer, and then the other person I believe is going to be Daring as well. They work as a tandem for their role in playing this thing called Mephistiel. I think it's supposed to be kind of like Mephistopheles or something like that. I'm drawing a blank on how I actually say that name. But Darren Etner is Father Moore. I thought he was fine. I'd also give credit here to Pearson, who is Andrew Pearson. And then Gill. The rest of the cast were fine for what was needed, although it's something new filmmaking aspects. I do think the cinematography and framing are solid. They're able to capture the isolation of where Soul's Chapel is. I like the interior there. I would also say the framing is good. The bit of blood that we see works. The after effects of some of the attacks, those were actually pretty solid. If I have some issues, there's some CGI here that doesn't hold up. The music was fine without standing out. Sound design worked for what was needed. In conclusion, this is an ambitious attempt to combine occult horror with spaghetti western genre, and it finds some success in its casting of a style of drifter hero and the solid cinematography and framing that captures the isolation of the setting. However, this ultimately falters due to the story that lacks some true connecting threads, leaving the narrative feeling intentionally vague and underdeveloped. While themes of greed, isolation, and corruption of the sacred are explored, the writing is a bigger issue, leading to some dull issues here. So coupled with some weak CGI, Soul's Chapel has an intriguing premise that struggles to fully deliver on its potential. So my rating here then for Soul's Chapel is going to be a 5 out of 10, and I believe this will probably be hitting VOD here in the nearest future. And for my next review here is going to be another one that I got to check out as a screener of Beyond Mamushi. This is directed by M.W. Daniels, who also wrote this. This is from 2026. This is starring Karina Jane, Gemma Thompson, and Gary Cross. This is a horror film that is from the United Kingdom. This is currently sitting on a 7.6 on IMDb and a none of ratings over on Letterboxd, but I would say about a 3.5 star movie over there, with the synopsis being: when Kate Andrews perfect life in her dream home implodes under her partner's sadistic psychological brutality, medication-fueled hallucinations. So Kate is being portrayed by Jane. So this one I got the chance to see when the writer and director here of Daniels reached out via social media. Since I enjoy checking out independent cinema when I can, I agreed to watch this for review. Other than knowing that this was, considered to be in the horror genre, I came into it blind. And this does count as a 2026 horror film, as well as a Scouring Through the Sixes watch. So I'm going to go ahead and start is noting that this has a brief runtime of about 50 minutes. When I appreciate the lack of filler, this brevity also hinders the product by failing to fully flesh out the story for me. So the movie moves quickly, introducing Kate and her immediate struggles. And I should also say her partner here is going to be portrayed by Cross, and he is Chris Sherborne. So, like I said, it introduces her and her immediate struggles. We have some effective flashbacks here showing her life before the decline. We also get glimpses into this enigmatic psychologist who is Ama Mamushi, portrayed by Thompson. Though the narrative ultimately lacks enough depth to fully, completely, successfully blend out everything that we need. So we have a relatable real-world issue here, though, it needs more exploration of Chris's sudden change. It suggests that a stress of moving in together sparked his sadistic need for control, evidenced by him locking away Kate's essential medication. So while she uses her kite to stay grounded, they are trapped in a cycle where brief improvements are shattered by minor inconveniences. We also have this element of Kate and her hallucinations. During the first time that Chris berates her, she sees a darker version of him. This infuriates him even more. What is good use here is to establish that she's unreliable. There are two encounters that make me wonder, did they happen or did she imagine them? One puts her resolved to get free. There's another drastic decision that needs to be, kind of made from there, where she might be the villain due to what is being done to her. If it happened, she is justified, though. Just an intriguing aspect of the story that makes me want to look a little bit deeper. Other elements here I want to include would be evolving the situation here. Chris is not allowing Kate what she needs. He is isolating her. This makes her mental state even worse. Being trapped in a bad relationship develops as well in a form of claustrophobia. Then something happens I had to look up. A Mamushi is a Japanese viper. This can symbolize Chris, who is a caregiver, also being a predator. Ma also pushes Kate to regain her autonomy through removing the festering influence through violent means. So as we enough of the story, let's shift over to talk about the acting performances. Jane is good here. I felt for her and that she wanted Chris to just let up and she needed his help. Seeing the mental abuse she goes through is horrible. Also credit Cross. I love that we see him before the change, since that does show the drastic difference there. Thompson is good as this haunting figure who is asking Kate to do something horrible for a good reason. I'd also give credit here to Stephen Atkins, who is Len. This is Chris's father. There's also Kathy Griffiths and Natalia Sara Skorupa help to round out the rest of the cast as well. Also have to be the filmmaking aspects. I do think the cinematography and framing are good. This has a low budget feel to it, but that's not necessarily meant as a slight. I do like how we can show things that we're seeing in the past through just kind of a little bit like a fuzzier focus. Quick cuts of things that Kate sees also set up a couple of things later, so credit for that. Is limited to the effects used. It also doesn't necessarily need them. They look to be practically done, which is a positive. Other than that, the sound design and music fit for what was needed. In conclusion, this is an intriguing, low-budget 2026 horror film from writer and director Daniel, centering on Kate's psychological torment under her abusive partner of Chris and her desperate turn towards the enigmatic Ama. While the brief 50-minute runtime, though appreciated for its lack of filler, ultimately prevents the story from being fleshed out fully, and this successfully explores complex themes of isolation and abuse, using Kate's hallucinations to create an unreliable narrator that deepens the viewing experience. So the strong performances from Jane and Cross, combined with good cinematography and fitting practical effects, make this a worthwhile watch for independent cinema fans despite its narrative brevity. So my rating, though, for Beyond Mamushi, I'm going to give this a 6.5 out of 10. And then my last feature here that is not a documentary is going to be Obex. This is from 2025. It was directed by Albert Birney, who also wrote this and stars in this. And then this was written with Peter Ohms. And this features Callie Hernandez and Frank Mosley as well. So it's a fantasy horror sci-fi film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 5.6 on IMDb and a 3.3 on Letterboxd, where synopsis being: Connor Marsh's secluded life is disrupted when he plays the Obex game. His dog Sandy disappears, blurring reality and the game. Connor enters the Obex world to rescue Sandy, navigating its strange realms. So Birney is taking on the role there of Connor, and then the dog the dog Sandy is portrayed by a dog named Dorothy. And so this was a total blind watch at the Gateway Film Center. I went in knowing nothing except this was a 2025 horror release. since I liked it enough, I wanted to give it a rewatch for my 2026 end of year list because that's when it got its wide release. I'll also go ahead here and say that I also did a mini review over on episode 325, so I'll direct you over there. That was the Profane Exhibit, and 28 years later, the Bone Temple. So yeah, if you are curious to hear a little bit more, go over there. So for this one here, we have a nostalgic setup for like a quest. It's set in 1987, following Connor, an isolated artist who he actually will create computer art of people if you send him $5, but then he ends up entering the state-of-the-art computer game called Obex. At first he's struggling with it because it's very repetitive, and in order to play you have to send a video of yourself and $20 to be digitally inserted into the world. The catalyst is the demon Axaroth, who is the villain in the game, steals his dog, Sandy. The game blurs the reality there. He must venture into this 8-bit inspired world, complete with a sword and hat and companion with a TV for a head to save her. So this is a study in agoraphobia for me. So beyond the monsters, there's this character setup. He doesn't like going out. He relies on screens and mail to interact with the world, as well as talking to Mary, who is portrayed by Hernandez, as she brings him his groceries. So this game forces him out of his safe zone, using the emergence of cicadas as a metaphor for his own need to grow and resurface. We also have Birney. He carries this film, and while the supporting cast like Hernandez is the grocery store deliver, but she also appears as a shopkeeper when he actually is in this world. I think this brilliantly mirrors like the non-playable characters in video games. So we also have a do-it-yourself kind of aesthetic, shot artistically in black and white, kind of showing the nostalgia of the past as a very lo-fi feel as well. We have some practical effects and older computer tech to create a charming, atmosphere there. While the pacing is a bit deliberate and slower, the way it uses 8-bit adventure to like veneer to explore the digital dependency before that became a huge thing like it is something I really kind of appreciated there. So for me, I actually give this one, though, the second time around, I gave it a bump up in rating here to a 7.5 out of 10. Not going to be for everybody. I just have nostalgia because this is the type of video games that I got kind of introduced to and everything like that. So, yeah, like I said, 7.5 out of 10. And I got to check out the documentary of This Is GWAR from 2021. This is directed by Scott Barber. It features, I believe, just archive footage of Dave Brocky, Hunter Jackson, and Sexecutioner. I think those last two are actually in the movie. But this is a music documentary film that is streaming on Shudder, actually. But this is from the United States, I believe. This is sitting on a 7.7 on IMDb and a 3.8 on Letterboxd or Synopspeum. The powerful story of the most iconic heavy metal art collective monster band in the universe as told by humans who have fought to keep it alive for over 30 years. So this is one, I'll be honest, I wasn't overly excited to check out. I didn't even know if I was going to. So I remember when it hit Shudder, since I never really got into the band. I wasn't particularly drawn to seeing this, since this is considered to be in the horror genre due to the antics of this band. I figured I'd go ahead and just watch it late in my day so I could just kind of have something to treat as like a podcast. So for most of it, we're learning about the history of the band, and this is what I actually loved. It started due to Brocky, who was into science fiction and horror, helped to come up with the idea of a band to open for his hardcore punk band of Death Piggy. The original name was GWAR or something like that. It had the gimmick of space Vikings that came to Earth. This led to shortening the name and coming up with this wild stage productions. It is from here that we learned about the evolution of the group. Members coming and going. This band then took off, gaining notoriety for their antics, which led to potential censorship. They did end up being nominated for a couple Grammys, which was wild to hear. Their punk roots came out, which rubbed people the wrong way, but it also held them back from getting greater success while also gaining them kind of like a huge cult following. This is balanced with the band, learning about how, or actually, this is balanced with the bad. Learning about how Dave rubbed band members the wrong way. People would come and go, whether it was like disagreements, health, or just needing to move on. Plus, I'll be honest, there were a few things that made me tear up. A big part of this was, despite the issues in fighting, most of these guys actually truly loved each other. That's something I felt. We also have some celebrities here that bring in how they felt and their kind of experiences with the band. It was fun to see like Alex Winter, Bam Margera, Ethan Embry, Thomas Lennon, and even the great Weird Al Yankovic. I get that many of these band members that they could tell their side of the story. I really appreciated that. Hearing both sides of different times definitely helps, because I'm a firm believer that there is, one side, the other side, and then the truth is somewhere in the middle. All stuff that the filmmaking aspects. This is well made on top of all that. The editing, old concert footage, and was fun to kind of get an idea of their antics. Seeing stuff behind the scenes is also up there. I love how they use GWAR music. As somebody who isn't overly versed, it makes me more intrigued, as this is a professionally made documentary, so credit there. So overall, this is a professionally done documentary successfully chronicling the turbulent history of GWAR, from its origins as like a space Viking gimmick conceived by Brocky to its evolution into a notorious Grammy-nominated metal band with a massive cult following. The film expertly balances the band's wild, often censored antics with deeply personal conflicts and genuine affection shared among its rotating members, featuring candid interviews from past members and celebrities like Alex Winter and Weird Al Yankovic, and utilizing well-edited concert footage. The documentary is compelling and well-made watch that intrigues even non-fans, as you can tell by me. So my rating here for This Is GWAR, I actually rather enjoyed this one and gave it an 8 out of 10. And I have a review for a documentary here of Terror in the Skies. This is from 2019. It was directed and co-written by Seth Breedlove. This is also written by Mark Matsky. This is featuring Lyle Blackburn, Lauren Coleman, and Ken Gerhard. This is a documentary from the United States. This is a Small Town Monsters documentary, and this is currently sitting on a 5.9 on IMDb. Not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say about a 3-star over there with a synopsis being: journey to the heartland of the Midwest, explore an ongoing wave of sightings of red-eyed, shapeless creatures dubbed the Chicago Mothman, giant unknown birds, and encounters with prehistoric flying reptiles. So this is another one I decided to check out late in my workday. I like to treat these like podcasts when I listen, look down, and if something is particularly interesting. I've seen a good number of these documentaries, of course, from Breedlove and the Small Town Monsters team. So it's the next one up as I'm working through that back catalog of the ones I hadn't seen yet. So this takes place in Illinois. Throughout the state, there have been sightings of flying creatures that at times have been dubbed the Chicago Mothman. This does well in setting the stage before you get the lay of the land of the state. It's an interesting one because I grew up in Michigan and I live in Ohio. I don't recall ever going into Illinois as of yet. I know I'm going to Chicago here soonish, at the time of recording this at least. Or if I did, I was too young to remember going to that state. Being from the Midwest, I understand it enough though. So most of the folklore on this cryptid seems to be focusing on something called a paisa. I think I might be say that? Paisa? This is a native Indian legend about a thunderbird. This goes back to colonial days where there was an image carved into stone along a river. There have been sightings as far as like the Mississippi River and even into Missouri. I did like hearing eyewitness testimony, even if they are conflicting stories. It ranges from like a large hawk, pterodactyl maybe, or even something a little bit more humanoid like the Mothman. There's even footage from a native dubbed Texas John who claims to have filmed this. So there's other elements here like thunderbirds getting their name as they're supposed to come before storms. This brings up questions about this creature appearing before disasters, like are they harbingers of doom? I do find the different stories interesting as they are incorporated in. I'll go ahead and just say that the people interviewed here are good. I've seen other documentaries with this team, including Blackburn. Hearing people tell their stories is good. I'm going to include my disclaimer here. I cannot discredit anything said, so I won't try. I don't fully believe that there was a creature flying around. But since I don't have a way of refuting the evidence that is presented, I will stay in the middle. I'll also let them be the filmmaking aspects. I do think that the cinematography and framing are good. I do love showing the landscapes and maps to help make sense of the different things that are being said. Something funny here, though, are the effects. They are cheesy, almost like PlayStation 1 style. There's charm there. I do appreciate that. At least they tried to liven up the product, and that's something I'll give credit to. So his documentary successfully sets the stage for folklore surrounding the Illinois flying creature, linking it to native Indian Paisa legend and presenting a wide range of eyewitness accounts that conflict in their descriptions. While I remain neutral regarding the creature's existence, unable to discredit the presented in evidence, this is still credit for its quality interviews, which include Blackburn. Ultimately, the filmmaking excels in cinematography and utilizing maps to ground the stories, although charmingly cheesy PlayStation 1 style effects add a unique touch. The documentary is a worthwhile entry into the Small Town Monsters catalog. If you're kind of working through these ones are just kind of fun to put on and just kind of roll with it. So my rating here, though, for Terror in the Skies, I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10.
Now see the welcome Sweeney Todd gives to gentlemen who return from foreign parts.
I could hang you, Sweeney, with one word like that.
And I could hang you, my precious, without that. If we must hang together, better alive than dead. The Golden Hope will soon be home, and then you can have your money in full. Do you suggest I await the return of the Golden Hope before I speak to your daughter? My dear fellow, there's nothing to prevent your asking her now. There's much to prevent her accepting me, and there'll be still more to prevent it if the Golden Hope is here. Then what do you suggest? You pay me the money you owe me. But I can't, Todd. You know I can't. Then the new ship becomes my sole property. But you can't. You wouldn't. You can. Have you read our little agreement? But I wouldn't if you were my father-in-law. But I can't answer for my daughter. The girl has a will of her own, and you must cultivate some powers of persuasion. She's a good girl, a dutiful daughter. And when she knows her father's future is in her own hands, at so small a cost to her, can you doubt what her answer will be?
Where have you been? What kept you from me?
And for my first featured review is going to be The Demon Barber of Fleet Street. So this is obviously telling the tale of Sweeney Todd. This is from 1936, directed by George King. This was written by Frederick Hayward, and H.F. Maltby did the dialogue, and then George Dibdin Pitt is the one, I believe, who did the play, maybe? So this is starring Todd Slaughter, Stella Rowe, and John Singer, while also featuring here the likes of Eve Lister, Bruce Seaton, DJ Williams, Davina Craig, Jerry Verno, Graham Soughton, Billy Holland, Norman Pierce, Aubrey Malalou, Henry B. Longhurst, and Ben Williams. So this is a crime drama horror film that is from the United Kingdom. This is currently sitting on a 5.8 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, or Synopsis. A Fleet Street barber recounts the story of Sweeney Todd, a notorious barber who in the last century murdered customers for their money. So Sweeney in this one is going to be portrayed by Slaughter. So I picked this up on DVD after seeing the Tim Burton Johnny Depp version, because I was in that kick where I wanted to try to seek out different versions of stuff that was especially kind of in the horror genre. So this was a play or a story that I wasn't very familiar with until seeing that Burton version. And then, so it had been many years since I picked this up. I'm now getting around to seeing this as a part of Scouring Through the Sixes here, as you know, I worked through 1936. So let's actually start with some feature notes then, and I'll start with the director of King. He has done 36 features and 2 shorts. This is the first of his that I've seen. He did 5 total. I've seen I've not seen yet The Face at the Window, Crimes at a Dark House, The Ticket of the Leave Man, or The Crimes of Stephen Hawke, which this last one here will be coming up soon, as it's from 1936 as well. So we have an assistant director here of Ronnie Kinnock, only credit in this role. Then to the writing room, Hayward did the screenplay. He did this for 3 films, all in genre. This is the first that I've seen. The other 2 are going to be Crimes at the Dark House and The Crimes of Stephen Hawke. Then the other person who did the dialogue is going to be Maltby. They did this for 26 movies, and 4 of them are in genre. First that I've seen has 4 total in genre. This is going to be a little bit of a repeat here. Crimes of the Dark House, The Crimes of Stephen Hawke, and The Ticket of the Leave Man. Then last is going to be Dibdin, or I think it might be Pitt, who did the play or something along these lines. This is their only credit. Then to the cast. First is going to be Slaughter. So he's actually come up here as he was in Maria Martin or The Murder in the Red Barn. So I've seen 2 of his 14 motion pictures for 14%. He also has 7 shorts. He did 8 total horror films. Top 3 that I'm missing are Face at the Window, Crimes of the Dark House, and The Crimes of Stephen Hawke. So technically, according to Letterboxd, I've only seen 12% of his horror films. The thing is, Letterboxd does not consider Maria Martin to be a horror film. If you include that one there, I'm actually at 22%. So there's also Roe. Been in 7 motion pictures. I've seen 2. She was also in Maria Martin. This would be the only 2 in genre that she's done. Then there's also Singer. I've seen one of their 40 films. He was also in one short. This is the only one they've ever done in genre. All right, let's jump into this one here. Like the synopsis says, we start in modern times. There is a man who goes into a barber shop for a shave. He inquired about a painting on the wall. It depicts a caricature of Sweeney Todd. The customer doesn't know the story, so the barber goes into telling it. We then shift to what I'm guessing is the Victorian era. We are at the docks where there's Mark, portrayed by Seaton. He's in love with Johanna Oakley, portrayed by Lister. Now her father is Stephen, portrayed by Williams. He doesn't approve of these 2 being together. The major reason is that Mark is poor. And there's an intriguing element here that we'll learn later about this that I'll come back to that actually involves Sweeney. And then Mark is setting sail soon with his crew, which includes Pearly, portrayed by Verno, and then the guy who's in charge of that is going to be Captain Stevenson, portrayed by Ben Williams. It then shifts over to introducing Sweeney in his shop, where an official comes in with a boy. So the boy here is Tobias, portrayed by Singer. Now we learn a dark secret that Sweeney has been provided other boys and they've gone missing. I think like upwards of like 8 or 9 now. Sweeney is told this is the last one that'll be left in his care, which is wild to me. He creeps out the child, especially with his long, drawn-out cackle when he laughs. He does ease the boy's fear by giving him a penny, as next door is a meat pie shop that is ran by Mrs. Lovett, portrayed by Roe. And that's where Tobias goes to buy one. So when the boy leaves, we then see that she's connected to Sweeney. Their shops share a basement, and she's able to enter his place, like through the floor, of course. Now, there's an uneasy partnership here. Tobias is shocked as he comes in to, like, I mean, this is where he's supposed to be, like, working, and he sees her here, but, because what he's confused by is that when he left her shop, she was still there. So this is where we see the racket this duo is running. Sweeney lures men into his barbershop, talking about how skilled of a barber he is, and how, like, as a shaver, and how he can get him in and out very quickly, and high quality. So when they're in the chair, though, there's a lever that dumps them into the basement below. We then see his next victim. He steals money and jewelry from a satchel before Mrs. Lovett comes over. He still expects his half when she's finished. What she does with the bodies helps to make her meat pies. So this one is very much downplayed in this version. I don't even necessarily know if they lean or even acknowledge too much about what she does with them, but as somebody who's seen the updated version, I have a good idea. So a new aspect of this process is to give Tobias a penny to get him out of the shop. And actually, it's kind of ironic because he sends him next door, so he's almost paying himself. So we have complications here as well. Sweeney wants to marry Joanna. He is blackmailing her father, as it sounds like he's loaned him money or paid for the expedition that Mark is on. So Mark, being pretty much a pauper, like a poor sailor, prevents him from getting the blessing to marry Joanna. We then see that his fortune changes. So he's on a ship near Africa. There's a man living there who is attacked by natives. The captain, Mark, and others go to help. Mark is there when the man who lives on this land dies, and this guy gives him a bag of pearls, changing his fortunes. He's also made acting captain of the ship. So upon Mark's return, Sweeney targets to keep him away from Joanna. Mrs. Lovett gets involved, thwarting his plan. Tobias tries to alert authorities as to what is happening, but he's largely ignored. That is until he seeks out Joanna. A trap is set for Sweeney, but we see how ruthless he is to get away. So that's only my recap and introduction of the characters. What I want to start is by stating that coming in, I was expecting some elements, not realizing that those were probably done for that version that Tim Burton did. I don't want to compare too much, but Burton and Depp making Sweeney Todd into an anti-hero who is getting revenge for wrongs isn't in this version. I've not seen or read the play or like any of the source material type stuff, so this is only the second version of the story I've ever seen. I'm even more intrigued now to seek out the others. Now that it's set up, let's go into our lead character here. It is interesting that in the opening, the barber has a painting of him, and at the end of the tale points out that where the customer is sitting is exactly where Sweeney did what he did. This actually makes for an interesting framing story, and it also is kind of played for comedy as it spooks the customer. Slaughter plays this role so menacingly. He creepily asks Tobias to come closer a few times. His laugh goes on for too long, and it's eerie. They do well in making Sweeney into a villain here. Then let's discuss his partner of Mrs. Lovett. They don't do a great about developing her as a character, but she is benefiting from the darkness that Sweeney is doing. They're both robbing the customers. She's also using them for meat pies. There's a hint here that she was in love with Sweeney at one point, but at the point of the events that we're at, she knows that he'll never love her, and they almost are just contentious in their relationship. She thwarts his plan by helping Mark. It feels like she's had enough, even if it means her downfall as well. Roe works well for what was needed in this role, I will say that. So I want to go next would be Joanna, her father, and Mark. What is interesting here is that Stephen Oakley is in a position of power. He might be the governor. I might have kind of misunderstood when they introduced his character, but Sweeney is blackmailing him. If I was following the story, Stephen borrowed money and cannot pay it back at this time. Sweeney is using that to control him, including to marry his daughter. She is creeped out to the point where, partially because he's older than her, there's also something just off. Now, Mark truly loves her and is doing what he can to position himself to be her husband, and that's mostly like class, society, financially. Sweeney is sabotaging him using murder as needed. So other elements to include here would be the corruptive power of greed. We don't get the baseline, so that's a little bit difficult for me. But there is like urban anonymity, seeing how easy it is for somebody to vanish in the city. There's also this facade of respectability. As Sweeney is talented at what he does, he's using his barber skills to effectively kill victims. There's also a look at class resentment, turning them into meat pies is eating the rich. Sweeney is trying to move up socially. How this is presented is a tame version of like the Grand Guignol tradition. It can also be seen as like an early proto-slasher. I'll then take this to the acting performances. Slaughter and Rowe work as our two leads. I love that they have an uneasy partnership while taking advantage of each other. Singer works as the boy who is in a dangerous position. Lister and Seaton are fine. The former does help to bring Sweeney's downfall. I'd also say here that Williams, Davina Whitehouse, Verno, and the rest of the cast runs off what was needed. So I do have one bit of trivia, but I'm going to go to the acting or the filmmaking aspects. The cinematography and framing are fine for the era. They are limited by the technology. I did like this chair contraption that Sweeney uses. The costumes do look to be of the era, so that's a positive. What they did with Mark and his crew in Africa was interesting. Due to this, when it was made, they don't use much in the way of effects. There are also things that are left up to the imagination, which I don't always necessarily hate. Other than that, the music didn't stand out or hurt the overall film for, what I kind of saw. So I will say, though, is that for the trivia, this was one of over 200 titles on a list of independent feature films made for television presentation by the Advanced Television Pictures, as this was announced back in 1942. At the time, television broadcasting was in its infancy, almost totally curtailed by the advent of World War II, and would not continue to develop until 45-46 era. Because of poor documentation, no record was shown as to when this was initially broadcasted, but it sounds like it might have been in New York City, potentially, back in 1944, so kind of interesting there. So in conclusion, this version stands as a fascinating example of early horror driven by Slaughter's menacingly eerie performance as a true villain. The film effectively portrays an uneasy criminal, partnership with Mrs. Lovett, and explores dark themes of greed, class resentment through the Grand Guignol approach. While filmmaking is technically limited by its era, it remains a competent and intriguing proto-slasher that offers a different, more ruthless perspective on the Sweeney Todd legend than more some of the modern adaptations, at least the one that I've seen. So for my rating here for the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. I'm not going to do a spoiler section. I don't necessarily think there's anything a little bit deeper or anything like that I need to do there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review.
Can I get 2 slices of pizza?
No. Of course, honey.
No, you never ever finish 2.
Hello?
Mr. and Mrs. Cannon, I'm Deputy Chief at the U.S. Embassy. Your daughter Katie has been found. She's alive.
It's very important you fully prepare yourself for what you're about to see. No sudden moves. No loud noises.
Hey, Butterfly. It's Mom and Dad.
Yeah, we are here. We're here.
She's been missing for 8 years. What was our daughter doing in a 3,000-year-old sarcophagus?
She just needs our care and lots of love.
How many others were found?
57.
How many of them were still alive?
What happened to Katie? What really happened to her? Loto, Señor de los Milagros.
Say something.
Loto, Señor de los Milagros.
Say something.
Es transformado imposible en realidad.
Say something.
Say something! Amén.
Say something. Don't worry, Grandma. It's fun to be dead.
And for my second featured review is going to be Lee Cronin's The Mummy from 2026, written and directed by Lee Cronin. It stars Jack Rayner, Layla Costa, and May Calamawe. I think it might be how you say that name. If I mispronounced it, I do apologize. This also features Natalie Grace, Shiloh Molina, Billy Roy, Veronica Falcone, Hayat Camila, May El-Getty, Emily Mitchell, Hassam Shadat, Tim Safi, Mark Mitchison, Gideon Emery, Dean Allen Williams, Gerald Papassian, Hannah Kogali, and Jamie Doyle. This is a body folk monster supernatural horror film that is a co-production between Ireland, United States, Spain, and Canada. This is currently sitting on a 6.4 on IMDb and a 2.7 on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being: the young daughter of a journalist disappears into the desert without a trace. 8 years later, the broken family is shocked when she returns to them, as what should be a joyful reunion turns into a living nightmare. So this is a movie that I was intrigued to check out. Originally, I did roll my eyes knowing that they were doing another version of The Mummy. Seeing that this was Cronin, that intrigued me. I did think it was a little bit odd that his name was in front of it. Now, there's a trivia bit that I'll actually jump over to real quick, since I thought that was kind of interesting, is that it was originally just going to be The Mummy, but producer Jason Blum added Lee Cronin's name to distinguish it from the previous Mummy films. Cronin was initially unsure, but ultimately agreed. So him being apprehensive about it actually kind of gives me a little bit more where I think that it's probably the right choice. So I'm a fan of the two films that I've seen by this director, and I'll get into that here in a minute. But so the praise as well that I saw people were having for it was taking the source material and doing like an Evil Dead treatment to it, because he did Evil Dead Rise. I did catch this on the Saturday of the second week that it was in the theaters as well. And so let's jump over to those featured notes, and I'll start with our director here of Cronin. He has helmed 6 features and 4 shorts. 2 don't look to be released as of yet, but I've seen Evil Dead Rise, this, and Hole in the Ground, all in the theater actually. I'm just missing Minutes Past Midnight, and he's also attached to something called Thaw and Box of Bones, so I've seen 50% of what he's done. And then there are 2 assistant directors here. First is going to be Dyer Glynn, who has come up before, and they've done this for 7 movies in 1 short. I've seen 4 for 57%. They are all in horror with Evil Dead Rise, Abigail, this, and Hole in the Ground. And the other assistant director is going to be Nicola Long. They've worked on 2 motion pictures, only one that I've seen, first that they've done in horror. Then there's an additional director here of Charlie Endine. They've worked on 8 films, first that I've seen, only 1 in horror. Then Cronin has wrote the same things that he has directed, so same credits across the board there. Then looking at our cast, first is going to be Rayner. I know him from Midsommar. He's been in 27 features in 1 short. I've seen 3. Not horror would be Transformers Age of Extinction. I've only now seen his 2 works that he's done in horror with this and Midsommar. The next is going to be Costa. She's been in 20 movies and 4 shorts. I've seen her in 2 things. I've seen her only 2 works in genre now, with the other one being Piercing. Then I look at Kala Mawe. She's been in 10 films and 11 shorts. I've seen her in Moon Knight, that Marvel show. Thought that was alright. Now, she's in one other one in the genre with The Jinn from 2013. And I'm also going to give credit here to Grace. She's been in 4 motion pictures and 2 shorts. First of her things that I've seen, and this is the first thing that she's done in horror. So then for this movie here, we start with the family as they're in a car. Now, driving is a woman that the movie actually only refers to her as the magician. She's portrayed by Camille. Now, she's with her husband and 3 children. They're all having a good time while the mother is annoyed. They come home to find that their bird has died. This makes the parents worried. They go into their cellar that harbors a secret. Inside is a sarcophagus. They fear that whatever is inside has woken up, and we see that is the case. At least partially. So then this shifts over, and I'll state that this is in Cairo, Egypt. So we have Charlie Cannon, portrayed by Rayner. He lives there with his pregnant wife and their 2 children. He is a reporter, hoping to get a job in New York, kind of like his dream job, like in New York City, that is, as well. His wife is Larissa, portrayed by Costa. She's a nurse and is pregnant. Their older child is Katie, portrayed by Mitchell, and she's practicing her Morse code. It looks like she's doing something that's kind of similar like the Girl Scouts or like the Boy Scouts with Cairo Young Explorers. They also have a son of Sebastian, portrayed by Williams. Now, these parents have the worst nightmare that a parent could have come true. Larissa goes to work. Charlie is watching the children. Katie goes outside to have a tea party in the garden. It sounds like she has a friend who visits and hangs out outside of the fence. Today, though, the mother of this little girl shows up here. She entices her with a nectarine and then shows her a magic trick. Charlie discovers hidden chocolate bars in a dollhouse, asks Sebastian about it, and this leads to asking about the daughter. The problem is, she's gone. He gives chase and a sandstorm rolls in, allowing the magician to disappear with Katie. So then the family goes to the local police. So we actually get to meet here Dahlia Zaki, portrayed by Kalamawi. She is pulled from her position as like a phone operator, like answering the phones, due to her ability to speak English. This move is done by Detective Ishmael, portrayed by Shadat. Now, she is brought into the room with the parents to learn that they can, start the investigation. Something bleak here. The detective has a track record of finding missing people. The problem is they're not normally alive. Now, he believes that Charlie is behind this. Dahlia is sympathetic, and her superior isn't, like I said, and this gets Charlie very heated. So then we shift 8 years into the future. The Cannons have moved back to the United States, and to be New Mexico to be exact. They're living with Carmen Santiago, portrayed by Falcone. Now, this is Larissa's mother. Charlie gave up his dream job to move back here and works as a producer for a local news station. They've never given up hope to finding their little girl, but now they have a new daughter, obviously because the wife was pregnant, of Maud, portrayed by Roy. So the family tried to move on while also being stuck in the past. So then they get life-altering news via a phone call regarding a desert plane crash where a sarcophagus was discovered. Inside of it was Katie, who is now portrayed by Grace. Now, she was mummified and quite broken mentally. Her parents bring her home, and she's become animalistic, sparking a terrifying fight for survival. As Charlie investigates what happened to his daughter because he needs to know the truth, this threatens to change everything. This case has haunted Dahlia, who is now a detective, all these years as well. She continues to help as she gets even more intertwined. So that's something my recap and introduction of the characters. What I'm going to start then is giving credit. I'm glad this film did something different from the other versions. I'll be honest, ahead of seeing this one, this version from the late 1990s, with Brendan Fraser is probably my favorite to watch. I respect the Universal Classic with Boris Karloff. The sequels have diminishing returns. I've also seen The Hammer Take with Christopher Lee. Taking this into the realm of body horror allows for interesting things to be done, as mummy films are not my favorite in general. So at its core, this is a family drama. Charlie is consumed by his guilt because Katie was abducted while he was distracted by work, creating complex friction with Larissa. Though Larissa is a nurse and attempts to provide care once Katie is found, the situation becomes overwhelming due to underlying complications. Then you have Sebastian, who is as this older version of the child being portrayed by Molina, who doesn't know what to say when his sister returns. So much has changed. Maud wasn't even born and doesn't know how to interact with her either. So something else would be religion. We have both organized and pagan. The Cannons are living with Carmen, who I'm guessing is Catholic. She prays multiple times for Katie to get help. This causes bad things to happen to the grandmother. We will learn that the deeper we get into the folklore of what was in the sarcophagus and why this was done to Katie, it does humanize the magician and her daughter, who as an adult is Layla Khalil, portrayed by El Getty. I did appreciate that because they're doing something bad for a greater good. So then there's a line here that's treaded with the folk horror as well. A film like this tends to have an information dump. Charlie does find a startling discovery with skin removed from Katie. This leads him to a Professor Bixler, portrayed by Mitchinson. Now, what is interesting here is that this sets the stage about a cult from Egypt that was supposed to have died out. I love this stage being set, and we go for a long time away from it before it pops back up later. I do have to say, the writing here is just great. There are so many things that get presented early that connect later. I'm a sucker for that. So additional themes include possession is an invasive trauma, a violation Katie never chose. This subverts the typical priest mummy trope. Her play also touches on exploitation, referencing both human trafficking and the historical theft of Egyptian artifacts. Finally, the film explores mean-spirited concept of generational jail keeping, where a family must make a sacrifice to contain a demon. Let's transition over then to the acting. Rayner and Costa deliver strong performances of the parents. Their bickering and palpable fear felt deeply relatable. Kalamamwi is effective as his guilt-ridden outsider trying to help, while Grace is good as a heartbreaking role here as his possessed daughter. Supporting cast members of Molina, Roy, Falcone, Camille, El Getty all provide solid work that rounds this film out effectively. So then, for the filmmaking aspects, they're also impressive, with strong cinematography and effective framing of creepy scenes. The use of practical effects over green screen adds realism, while great practical effects and seamless CGI enhancement avoid glaring issues. Atmospheric music and sound design, especially the unsettling use of Katie's voice, successfully builds tension. However, this feels overlong at 2 hours plus. Tighter trimming could have improved the pacing. There's also some thematic elements that are borrowed from other films that I noticed. Not a great, but just kind of an observation that I had there. So let me do a little bit more trivia here. Is that the success of Evil Dead Rise, producer James Wan approached Cronin about directing a mummy film. He only agreed if they could do a different, more horror-focused approach in the material. Cronin cited Poltergeist and Seven as influences on the film's tone and themes, as well as Egyptian lore and Catholic faith. Cronin said this film was partly inspired by a personal experience with grief following his mother's death. The design of the mummy was partly inspired by preserved bog bodies at the National Museum of Ireland, where Cronin studied pre-production. Kalamamwi and El Getty are the first Egyptian actors to appear in a mummy film. Despite the previous ones being set in Egypt, they had actors from different countries portraying Egyptian characters. El Getty also helped with the Egyptian Arabic dialogue in the film. Kelamamwe is Egyptian-Palestinian and was raised speaking Levantan, I think it might be how you say that, Arabic, and had to work on her Egyptian-Arabic dialect for the film. The film's skin effects are created by a combination of latex and paper-like materials designed to tear realistically without breaking apart. Filming took place in Ireland and Spain back in 2025. It looks like March to June. The film is a standalone reimagining of the mummy myth and not connected to any of the other films. The poster drew attention in the UK for disturbing imagery, and the director defended it as inappropriate for a horror film. Professor Bixler shares a surname with a character from Cronin's Evil Dead Rise. Test screenings reportedly prompted strong reaction to the film's gore. Wan later clarified that he briefly left one screen to go to the bathroom but returned shortly after. This marks Kelamamwe's return to the horror genre after Jin. Following the trailer's release, some audiences mistakenly assumed this was going to be connected to an earlier mummy film starring Brendan Fraser, prompting clarification from the studio, and the production used the codename Resurrected during filming. So in conclusion, this is a refreshing and chilling reimagining that successfully shifts the franchise into the realms of body and folklore. While its 2-hour-plus runtime feels slightly overlong, the film is anchored by a powerful central performance from Rainer, Costa, Kelamamwe, and Grace. By blending a deeply emotional family drama about trauma and guilt with impressive technical craft, highlighted by atmospheric cinematography, unsettling sound design, and visceral practical effects, Cronin has delivered a standout entry into the genre that offers its roots while forging a terrifying new path. So my rating here, then, for Lee Cronin's Mummy, I rather enjoyed this one. I look forward to giving this another watch before the end of the year, and I end up coming in here at an 8 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section, not anything I necessarily do there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Listen, here's the truth. If it's not something you love to do, automation is mandatory. You didn't start your podcast to spend hours editing clips. You started it to create, connect, and grow your audience. But here's the problem. Every other platform works with video podcasts, and manual editing eats up your most valuable asset, your time. That's where Opus Clip changes everything. Upload your video, and Opus Clip will automatically find the gold nugget moments, auto-clip the captions for the best parts, perfect for TikTok, Reels, and Shorts. 1 hour-long episode becomes 10, 20, even 30 viral-ready clips in minutes. The tool even predicts each clip's viral potential, so you know exactly what to post. No more tenuous editing, no more wasted hours, just you staying in the place that you love to be, creating content that matters. Head to podnationopus.com for your free trial and get back to doing what you do best. Stop editing and start creating now.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast, found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And for my next episode, it's going to be a little bit of a milestone, being episode 340. So it's going to be my top horror films from 1926. I will cover the lost horror films. I will cover then all, I'm not sure what the number is offhand, but I will, break those down to all the ones that I watched and everything like that. And then I have some screeners here. I'm going to try to get those all in. Those will probably end up being like a 2026 stuff there. But my rewatch here for 1986 for my Scouring Through the Six is going to be Maximum Overdrive. And yeah, I will have some stuff here to watch and get everything reviewed for you. So I don't think there's anything else I need to say here for this outro outside of saying that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending